Yes, we are break back. I can't even talk after that short intermission. That was a great episode that we had on this double hitter night. If you're just tuning in, I am Mike Watson, the publisher of Freestyle Comics and the host of this show that we call Chat and Draw, a show where we chat and draw while I interview amazing creatives ranging from creators, comic book creators, TikTokers, YouTubers, cosplayers, comedians, and fans. We talk about the fandom that's going on currently. We talk about their projects, what they do, their history, and all that jazz. And then I draw something that will hopefully be epic. But without further ado, we're going to roll into this one immediately because I've already done all this on my first half of the show. Let's go ahead and get ready to bring out our guest, who I'm super stoked is here tonight. Let's get it on.
Wait a second. A new opponent has interrupted the tournament.
Let's get dangerous.
Yes! Here we are. And it is time to get dangerous. I have been saying this over and over in my head. Welcome, Tad Stones, to the show.
Hey, happy to be here.
Oh my goodness, very, very excited to have you here. For those of us who may not, on the per slim chance, know who you are, why don't you fill them in to the many things that you've done and who you are, sir?
I have no time for such barbarians. No, I now retired, but I started in 1974 at Disney Studios, Disney Feature Studios. Worked on Fox and Hound and various odd projects, some educational stuff. Moved over to what was then called WED. Now you would know it as Imagineering, and designed rides for Epcot with Ward Kimball on the Transportation Pavilion and Tony Baxter on the Imagination Pavilion. Ended back in TV for a few years. Who knows what I was doing, but I was still getting a paycheck. And then I was kind of one of the founding fathers of Disney TV animation. There at the first meeting, went back to whatever I was doing, and then was considering leaving Disney. And I talked to the guy who I had met at the TV animation meeting and saying, "Hey, do you have any freelance storyboarding?" And he looked at me and said, "Oh, you don't want to freelance. Why don't you come over and visit us?" And as he showed me around when I was visiting, he was like, "Yeah, Dad will be coming over here." I am, and a meeting with Jeffrey Katzenberg later, and turned out I was. And technically I started in management, but then quickly switched to the creative side where I always felt I belonged, and did the third season of Gummy Bears, and then moved into syndication with Chippendale's Rescue Rangers, and then of course Darkwing Duck. After that I did Aladdin, the TV series, which spawned the direct-to-video sequels. Then the Hercules TV series, where Hercules was a teenager. Did Buzz Lightyear Star Command, and am I forgetting one in there? Anyway, also did an Atlantis TV series, which never turned into a full series. Instead, it was put out as some of the early episodes were cobbled together to be a direct-to-video release. And I think that was most of my Disney stuff. My big highlight after that is I did, after doing a direct-to-video, New Adventures of Brer Rabbit, I did 2 Hellboy movies, which are probably second to Darkwing as far as the highlights of my career. So I did 2 of those, worked with Mike Mignola, and they're coming up on their, actually technically in their 30th anniversary of Hellboy. And then did a little bit of this and that, worked on Bob's Burgers. And my final thing was for Netflix, which was Kulapari, an Army of Frogs. And so I kind of went out with the cool kids working for Netflix. And then I stopped. And since then, I've done art. I've been pre-pandemic anyway, I was showing up at conventions a lot, selling original artwork, going on panels. I'm still available to do such things if you know a convention who wants me. And here and there, worked with the various people doing, comics based on characters I had created when I was at Disney. So that's been fun.
Awesome.
So I think I covered almost everything.
You did. Got a couple things that I didn't even know, but yeah, I appreciate that. We got the chat full of life here, and those QR codes that I was putting up earlier. Besides the one, our sponsor, Clip Studio, is here. So if you want to try out an art program, which I figure would be great for this episode, as we have two illustrators, animators here, check out Clip Studio. It's really there. It's an awesome program. You get 90 days access to it for that program. But
oh wow, the David Peterson is in the chat room, the creator of Mouse Guard. So awesome!
Wow, that's what's up.
David, I met online, basically tying back into Hellboy. Back, when you do a project like Hellboy, and you hear that, oh, the producer's a big Hellboy fan. Everybody's always skeptical because they think, oh yeah, he read some comics before he came to the con. But no, I was hanging out at hellboy.com at the time, I think it was, and made good friends of, a group of us just being Hellboy fans and doing cartoons, and eventually met up at conventions. In fact, some of those people stayed at my house for a few days before going to San Diego. So that's true fandom.
That is awesome, man. I'm loving it. I'm just here. I'm trying not to geek out here. And I'm sure you've heard this millions of times, but I would rush home from school to immediately throw on Darkwing Duck. I mean, I'm watching the Rescue Rangers, watching all that stuff after school. Carmen, my wife, is a huge Gummy Bears fan. She absolutely loves it and puts it on for the kids all the time. She watches that on Saturday mornings with the kids just to keep that theme of Saturday morning cartoons going. But
all right,
what is bringing you here tonight? I have a QR code up here, as I was trying to say earlier, and this is to the Darkwing Duck graphic novel Kickstarter.
Yeah, it's actually a collection because technically it's 3 different books. And they've gone back and got some of the out of print Darkwing Duck stuff, including I think it's a 10-issue run at Marvel that I didn't even know existed at the time. I was deep into Agrabah and working on Aladdin while this was going on. And strangely enough, evidently 3 of the stories had Darkwing living in a human world instead of the world we animated. So I don't know how that happened. I mean, we had a few stories where he went to another dimension full of humans, but maybe those are the only ones they saw. I don't know. But I'm looking forward to that, just to find out that. And then they're doing, what was the exciting thing about Dynamite is they not only did a Darkwing series, they immediately greenlit a Negaduck series by Jeff Parker and Justice Ducks by Roger Langridge. And that's Amanda Dibert, of course, who did the Darkwing series.
Awesome. All right. So today on Chat and Draw, I thought it'd be fun. I did a Darkwing Duck drawing. I love Darkwing Duck. I did a bit of a mashup. I
sent you those model seats. Did you get those?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I did a bit of a more on model. Come on. Do I have to draw over your stuff?
Hey, teach me. I'm traditionally more of a comic book artist, so animation style is a little bit more challenging for me or whatnot. I did a mashup of Dark Knight with Darkwing Duck. I thought that was kind of like the sweet tea spot.
Oh, sure.
On here or whatnot. But let's talk about how did you even get into animation? Like, how does that even start for you?
Well, I mean, it started when I was a kid. I mean, real young. First of all, my dad had wanted to be a newspaper comic artist, maybe an editorial cartoonist, but he graduated college after being like an artist on their humor magazine, the college newspaper. He graduated in the Depression, so it was more about getting a job than chasing your dreams kind of thing. But because of that, he had all sorts of art books, including the famous artist cartoonist course. He had books on animation. So I grew up with those. I was looking through those like they were comic books. And I just love cartoons. I mean, it was pretty cool. I mean, I think the first cartoon made for TV specifically, was Hanna-Barbera's Rough and Ready cartoon. and also Jay Ward doing Crusader Rabbit, which was a thing. But before I was in kindergarten, or in my kindergarten years, I'd get home at noon or so, whatever. The local TV show that had a sheriff host, which basically showed cartoons, showed early Warner Brothers, like the stuff you never see of before Bugs Bunny and Daffy and all that. I mean, some of the earliest stuff, but they showed cartoons that later I realized were actually silent cartoons that had been given soundtracks to sell to TV. So I was just immersed in all that. And then as far as Saturday morning, just watched everything I could. Um, and then, and again, because my dad had this, I mean, he ended up in advertising, but because he had that cartoonist desire and interest, he supported me, bought me in one of our trips to Disneyland, The Art of Animation by Bob Thomas. And here I'm paging through the book, and it takes you through every step of making a feature film in animation. And many of the guys in those pictures were people I ended up working with, years later. But I ended up at Disney because I fell in love. In that, when I was in high school, I thought the only place worth working for in animation was Disney. And they had all their guys. And what I meant by only one place was worth working, they were the only people doing full animation in the United States. Everybody else had figured out a way to do limited animation, cheaper animation directly for TV. And Disney did still have, a lot of the veteran animators that Walt hired were still working there. However, by the time I graduated college, they had started a training program, which was basically one guy, Eric Larson, and the review board would look at portfolios coming in, pick somebody, and then they had 4 weeks to turn out an animated test to see if they survived into a second 4 weeks. And if you survived that, they threw you into production as an in-betweener. Well, the only reason I found out that that training program existed was that my girlfriend at the time, her suite mate was Tori Atencio, the daughter of Ex Atencio, who was a Disney layout artist, worked with Ward Kimball on a lot of the classic space television shows for Disney, and then became a ride designer at Imagineering. So I called up for information. They said, "Oh, great, can you see us next Thursday?" At the time, I was not an art major. I had to cobble together, a portfolio, went in for an interview. They showed it they said, "Oh, could you really use more of this type of drawing, that type of drawing?" I did those types of drawing over the weekend, got it back to them, and
Oh,
I was
wow.
accepted. So I started at Disney in that training program 3 days after graduation, and I survived the first 4 weeks, survived the second 4 weeks, and then 2 years later, I was still at Disney, and I married my girlfriend. So
This sounds
that worked. A win-win-win.
this sounds like the most rewarding thing, and also like I feel like they put you through the trenches.
Oh, that was definitely it. Especially if you saw, I mean, I've posted online the one surviving pencil test that I did, which was after those 8 weeks. But when I look, my first test was just a very rough, basically an alligator in a pirate hat, just kind of dancing a jig, just, kind of doing this and this, didn't have a soundtrack or anything, just miming to it. And then he threw up a sword with his hand and caught it with his tail. And very short, very rough, but the animators, looked at it and said, "Hey, I got a feeling of personality in that." And that was enough to get me to the second test, which I did a more ornate thing, but it was still, it was like, there were good parts and weak parts, but luckily there was enough going that I was accepted in that. But I'm amazed now when I see, of course, a lot of this is because there's now the ability to make animation tests on a on various programs, gorgeous things. Well, in Clip Art Studio for that matter, gorgeous things with background, full color, animated things. I many times felt like I was so lucky to get in the industry when I did, because it was like I go through conventions where all sorts of animation students have tables and stuff, and I'd go, ooh, I don't think I'd get in, with this guy there. So anyways, it was that's how I got into the animation there, and hung around until finally they started up TV animation, and I was part of the early days of that.
That's incredible. So what, like I said, it sounded like they put you through the trenches. It was a lot of work to do those things like that. So
well, I gotta say, it was crazy. I had, because of those books of my dad's, I had a basic idea of animation work. I mean, I still have, I believe, down here. Yeah. Held together by clips. This animation book was they reissued it, I think, with a blue cover, but this, how ratty it is. This is funny. If you can kind of get a feeling for the type of stuff here, how to design characters, character types. Almost every animator at Disney also had this book at their desk. So they worked with these guys who had done Snow White, Pinocchio, and all that, and they still had, this thing there. So I had a basic understanding of that. So it wasn't just working with Eric Larson. I at least didn't feel lost, completely. Where I remember one guy came in and he was a teacher of drawing, taught anatomy and stuff like that, a brilliant draftsman, but he couldn't get the looseness, the what he needed to be an animator, and didn't get past his second 4 weeks, I don't think. So again, I at least hit the ground running with some basic knowledge, and not that it was everything I needed to know, but it was like at least a good basic start.
All right. I want to ask this question before we start looking in the chat for questions. When you said a basic looseness, he couldn't grasp that. What do you mean about a looseness? Can you kind of break that down?
I think just how, you would start, your drawings with a rough sketch where you're trying to get the feeling of the action, or the line of action, in a fight scene, is there somebody punching a force into it, and then this character is reacting, to that force. And you can actually draw a line usually through it, the line of action on that. So you start out rough, and this guy was so, imagine someone who draws perfect anatomy, but he's been drawing still models. So he thinks of the body as a stationary thing. And so just trying to, move those sculptures around was just hard for him. I mean, you even said you do more action adventure stuff, and the cartoonist style is rough for you.
Yeah.
That's, I'm kind of the opposite. But that's what I mean by looseness. It's really about the forces. Man, about 3 months after I started, Glenn Keane started, who's possibly one of the best animators of all time. At least could give them all a run for their money. Glenn, man, it was like he took graphite and pushed it into the paper, getting it around, getting these very rough drawings. But when you saw them move, all that energy was there. I used to make fun of him because he used to lick his thumb and smear some of his drawings that kind of give it a sense of shadow and mass to it. But it was great. When Glenn went into production, he worked with Ollie Johnson, and Ollie used to do, on The Rescuers, he did the character Penny, and it was great having all Glenn's energy now working with this little girl.
Oh, okay.
So it was just that really helped form him, thinking more sincerity and all of that. And so, I mean, it's, you know, and then later on, you know, that's put into The Little Mermaid, you know, when he's doing Ariel and all of that. So he got, you know, when you look at his roughs and flip through his roughs, I mean, you see what I mean by both looseness and yet capturing form and action, because animation is literally bringing life to drawing. So it's not about these still pretty poses.
Absolutely. Thank you for digging into that a little more. I appreciate that. Did you ever think, this is from Tessa, did you ever think that you'd be a legend, or do you suffer from imposter syndrome too, respectfully?
One, majorly, yes, not the legend part, the imposter syndrome part. Um, and the other thing, that I'm not technically a Disney legend because that's a certain category, and they get their handprints in cement and doing all of that. I'm not a Disney legend, nor is Ron Clements and John Musker, who of course did Little Mermaid and Aladdin and Moana and Princess and the Frog and all of that. And I used to share an office with Ron when we were started off. He lives about 10 miles that way.
Okay. Also,
Or
see
less.
some more questions here. Wiley Duster says 100% you paved the way for a whole generation of animators with your work. A man, and man, that book has went through the works, he says.
Oh yeah.
Ryan says this is amazing. Veronica says, one of my favorite cartoons in the Disney lineup. Sarah, welcome to the chat. Veronica said, I had an art professor who told me he'd break my finger if he caught me using my fingers for shadow blending, instead of a pencil.
There you go.
Yeah, I had a figure drawing teacher that was very specific like that and really wanted us to use the pencil. And I got lucky. I got one teacher in high school who was our sophomore year. We always got like our fine arts teacher who gave us our foundation and everything. But the sophomore year was the only year we got somebody who was impractical, who used everything to make art. And we all loved that. And then we had to go right back to painting flowers the very next year.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's really about, it's not how you get the end result. It's the end result that counts, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I love the painting work of James Gurney, and he's constantly mixing media and doing a gouache painting and then grabbing a colored pencil or putting some pastel on it and, you know, blending it in, because it's the final product that matters, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's how you get to it's how you end up at the destination. So with you working on so many things, but with this is the one thing I want to know about Darkwing Duck. I'm a comic book creator. I create characters from my story, and I create characters at like awkward moments, like when I'm house cleaning, things kind of motivate me or whatnot. Can you give us insight about like how was Darkwing Duck created for you? Like, what was that
Well,
process?
Darkwing, although the character has several origins, and if it went on longer, he would have had more. The actual creation of the show is very specific in that Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was chairman at Disney, president, whatever, he was the head of all motion picture and television and animation. He basically ordered me to create a new show with the title Double O Duck. Now,
Double O
people
Duck?
think, yeah, people have said, oh, Darkwing is based on 2 DuckTales projects. And it's like, or DuckTales episodes. There was an episode called Double O Ducks, which featured Launchpad and McQuack, and it was a James Bond gag thing. The other one was, I'm going to forget the name, Midnight Mallard, or I think that might, anyway, Scrooge being a superhero. People, even at the studio at that time, probably looked at those 2 things, and because they knew about the Double O Duck thing, and just assumed that both of those things. I don't think I've seen the other episode to this day. What happened is that Jeffrey said, Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg came over from Paramount, and one of the things they brought with them is the love of a quirky title, and or at least their definition of an intriguing title, I guess. And the idea was, if you had a show called Miami Mice, which we almost did, and or in this case, Double O Ducks, they thought, oh, that's intriguing enough that a few more people will try to tune into those early episodes because they're curious about the title. And then it would be up to us to keep those people, and by doing a quality show. So Jeffrey thought Double O Ducks was a great title, ordered me to do it. He said the only rule is it can't be Launchpad McQuack. It has to be an original character. That's the whole point. We have big success with DuckTales. We want to, create this new show and, a whole new line of characters. My first shot at it failed miserably because I wasn't enthusiastic about it. It was just a James Bond parody. And he said as much. He said it was missing Disney heart. So then I went into it, as I should have the first time, really trying to make something that I could get excited about. And we had artwork done that was just like a generic Disney duck, could easily be Donald in a white tuxedo. And he had a mask, a fedora hat, and a cape. And one of the story editors I wanted to work with was Dwayne Capizzi, and he was under contract at the studio along with the other guys that I wanted to work with, and we could just bring him into a conference room just to brainstorm ideas. And Dwayne, who did Jackie Chan Adventures, currently is doing a Transformers series, I think, and did Men in Black and Alf. Anyway, he looked at it and he said, with this tuxedo and this cape, he looks more like a pulp hero, and instead of a spy. And I lit up at that because I love that old stuff. It was before my time, but I'd heard old tapes of old radio shows. I certainly knew the pulp adventures, and every once in a while the Shadow would be done as a comic or whatever. But that gave us a new template. Instead of James Bond, it was like, oh, Doc Savage used to have this team of quirky eccentrics, and one was a chemical engineer, and one was a mechanical engineer, and one was a communications guy, and the other was transportation. And it was like, oh, that could be a different type of a team that he could work with. The problem is, as we developed, and Launchpad was thrown in there too, because as a possible pilot, he was already created. But it was just too many people to service in a show, because the more people you have, you got to give lines, and you're always up against a villain. The villain may have henchmen. There might be a victim. It's just a lot of bodies to move around. Plus, we were thinking, well, these guys would be mostly at home base. So you're going to spend how much time with them before you even go out on the adventure? Anyway, we kept paring it down until we just ended up with the trio that we have, because the major thing that sold the show was Gosling Mallard. It's basically, what if Batman had a little girl who refused to stay at home? And that was kind of, not that we pictured that. We weren't that pithy at the time, but that's what she ended up being. And that gave a little team. Launchpad was there because I pivoted as, well, okay, what happened in the middle of this? Disney liked the show. They started selling it. They took out double page ads in Variety saying, introducing Double O Duck. Almost every cartoon show and other magazines comics have done parodies of James Bond, and they generally say 00 something. And I guess the people who owned that, which was Cubby Broccoli, was the producer who had the rights to all the Ian Fleming Bond books, they just let that stuff slide. But when they were trying to reinvigorate the Bond franchise, so when they open up a major trade publication and it's a double page spread, it's like, no, we're not going to have people make fun of our 00 stuff on this scale. So we got to cease and desist, basically, or at least they threatened one, and that was enough for Disney to say, oh yeah, we don't have it. This is definitely owned by them. So we needed a new name. We had a contest, and the winner of the contest, who got $500, as I recall, was Alan Burnett, who was at Disney at the time. Alan, in fact, helped, for a while, tried to develop with other writers a Darkwing Duck movie, but then moved over to Warner Brothers, where he did a little thing called The Adventures of Batman with Bruce Timm. And, so again, the tried and true gag that we wear out is that we warmed Alan up with the Duck Knight for the Dark Knight. And he stayed at Warner Brothers, I think, for the rest of his career, and had a hand in every superhero, storyline that they worked on. So that's how Darkwing got started. He started out as a spy, got into the pulp area, but the main inspiration for me was once I lost that spy name. Spies were already part of the show, and that was an excuse to give us stories outside of the city. And any way to generate new stories you want to keep. But really, I then pivoted to the comics that I read as a really little kid. This is before Marvel was on the scene, was the Silver Age of comics. And that was when Jimmy Olsen turned into a giant turtle boy or Elastic Lad. And it's like every character, and they would repeat stories all the time. So Superman at one point got hit with an evolving ray. So his head turned into that giant fleshy light bulb. They did the same story, I believe, with Lois Lane, with the Flash, maybe Batman. I'm not sure about that one. But those things were all the crazy stuff I remembered from my childhood. And all that craziness, I put into the series, And so people think they look at somebody like the Liquidator, and they say, oh, he's based on Hydra Man, I think, is somebody at Marvel. And it's like
Hydra Man's at Marvel.
Yeah,
Mr. Freeze at DC.
That was when I was in college and wasn't buying comics anymore, because there was no such thing as a comic store. Anyway, what he was based on actually was Sandman from Spider-Man, specifically like Spider-Man #4, because the Sandman did things like turned into sand and went down a drain, and plus turned into all sorts of different shapes. And I believe Spider-Man mixed cement into him, and that was how they captured him early on. And that's kind of how we treated Liquidator, was that sort of thing. The same thing with Bushroot. He was not based on Poison Ivy, as many people think. He was actually based on Plant Man, which was a villain who fought the Human Torch in 2 issues. And that's where I got the idea of, then again, this idea goes back to Wizard of Oz. When trees are alive, they throw apples at you, and he had cactuses that would throw thorns and all that. And I saved that. That was part of Bushroot. And a little bit of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. The idea of he's practically eternal, that his pollen or seeds or whatever could go out and sprout to be more of him. So that let us do things like run Bushroot through a lawnmower and still survive to be back another day.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I really love getting all these behind the scenes stories and stuff. That's really incredible. And I appreciate telling us where some of these characters' inspirations came from, because I absolutely thought what you initiated, with he coming from Hydro Man or whatnot. So
it's the logical to think of, except that I didn't know about that character. And it's weird to think that he actually came from the Sandy character. But again, even people at the studio, unless they're in with me and the other story editors as we're coming up with stuff or whatever, they'll connect dots that aren't like the Below and Midnight Mallard or whatever, that aren't necessarily true, but it seems true at the time. And those have gotten repeated and into various people's interviews and all that. And it's what fans love to do now. Like the Darkwing origin. Darkwing, I believe, has something like 6 origin stories in the show. And people say, oh yeah, but the real one is he went to high school with Megavolt. Only because you like that story. He also rocketed to Earth in from Krypton or unnamed. I purposely did an episode inspired by the stories of the old Flash Museum, where you go through these different ages of the Flash and see different adventures. So that was part of the fun, because ultimately he's like the Shadow or Batman. He's a human guy, or duck guy anyway,
Yeah.
So there's nothing. I'm not going to have his parents killed in front of him and have a duck lose her pearls, after she's been shot, that kind of thing.
Right.
So it's like, I mean, I did a gag piece of original artwork of the exact panels of the origin of Batman, where a bat flies through the window, and I just had Darkwing saying, "I must strike, fear into the hearts of criminals," and then a duck flies through the window. And he goes, "That's it. I will become a duck." And then he looks down and goes, "Wait." So I mean, there was nothing that needed to be explained about him. What was more important at the beginning of the show was, how come he's got this little girl? And that was the story we told in a two-parter.
That's awesome. Because I mean, obviously, as a kid watching that, did not think of any of that. I was like, Darkwing Duck.
Yeah.
And Launchpad. They're cool. They're doing all the work. She needs to sit down. She's getting in the way. So, all right, where are we? Okay, I'm looking at the time, trying to manage the time better here. So, you guys have this Kickstarter's going. That's fully funded already. Congratulations. Let's get the QR code up there because more money does not hurt at all. Let's see here. There it is. All right, so tell us about this Kickstarter and why you think people should go over there. Why Darkwing Duck fans should go over there and check this out. If you guys scan that with your phone, it'll take you right over to the Kickstarter. But also, it is populated in the chat, so you can click it. Don't close this window. Keep us up. Open up another window and check it out.
Really, that's what your computer can do. It multiple windows. Well, they just invited me to participate in the Kickstarter. Although I've done covers for them. In fact, they hit one of the goals, which means everybody who's part of the Kickstarter will get a ash can of a new Darkwing series, and I did the cover of that. They're offering obviously you can get the books themselves. You can get hardcovers of the books. There is original art by Jay Lee. There is original sketch art. Like you can get 3 comic covers, sketch covers that all make one image. So there's all sorts of specific collectible stuff that various, artists will work on. There's prints and things like that. So, I mean, it's all sorts of cool stuff there. But ultimately, like I say, it's a cool collection of stories that, the older ones that, aren't out there anymore, some of the early ones. Although, much to my chagrin, they reprinted the original Darkwing Duck comic cover exactly as it was released when they forgot to color in the mask on his face. And they did that too, and it's just like, no. He's supposed to be wearing a mask, dude. Anyway, I would say any collector, there's all sorts of tiers and different things that you can, sign up for. Really, they just made a commitment to turn this thing out. They had a hugely successful Gargoyles Kickstarter that came close to $1 million, I think. So Greg Wiseman, I'm sure, will never let me hear the end of that. Greg, by the way, Greg was I don't know that everybody realized that Greg was an editor at DC, or an assistant editor or something at DC Comics. And he was pretty new to the department when he came to Disney. But luckily for us, he was assigned to be the executive on Darkwing. Because what they would do is, the point was to always have somebody who would know the show and kind of keep you on track in terms of, hey, this was pitched as a comedy adventure and you're losing the adventure side of things, or whatever it is, just supposed to be somebody who knows the show but is still more objective. Well, what was great is Greg knew all the Silver Age stuff we were referring to, and a super creative guy, obviously, that when his notes really helped things. And when we didn't want to take his notes, Greg will wear you down because he was so passionate. He said, I've said this several times because it can't hurt anymore. Greg once said to us, he said, look, I'm supposed to give you notes as an objective view. It's your show. You don't have to take those notes. Now, I never repeated that while I was working at Disney, because the last thing our boss would have allowed any executive to say is, "You don't have to take my notes." But like I say, if Greg gave you a note, he was passionate about it and he would argue and debate and whatever until you came around to his point of view, or at least understood it enough to maybe not make the exact change, but it would inspire a change that made the episodes better. But it was so great having somebody who knew comics so well, specifically being the guy, giving you notes on your, superhero show.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That is always appreciated working on projects. That's do a little shameless plug of my own. That's kind of the situation I'm running with putting in, doing my comic books through my label, is that me and my brother Danny are the ones that know all of the characters and all of the story. So whenever it comes like to hand out different assignments to work on something, we have to be closely invested in it. So we're trying to train a couple of the people and get them up to speed on our narrative so we can outsource that. They can handle other story ends and keep all of our worlds still connected.
Yeah, I mean, you're the experts, so you have to be. It's great that you have someone to bounce ideas off of that at least knows your stuff.
Tessa asked, what was your favorite project outside of Darkwing Duck to work on?
Over my whole career, probably Hellboy animated, because I mean, obviously it was an entirely different show. I always loved the character, loved the world that Mike Mignola created, and I was able to do, we did the second one, actually, the Blood and Iron. We played with the characters going into a haunted house, which they discovered was haunted while they were there. So unlike Scooby-Doo, where it's Shaggy and Scooby would be shaking going in, it would be a creepy looking place. It's like, no, this is a nice looking place, and then weird stuff happened that you could see in live action. That would be a super creepy thing, and we would be able to play with that in animation. And I don't know, we were real experimental. Mike and I wrote a third one that we never got to produce because somebody bought the company that was doing it and was not interested in doing more original stuff. The third one would have been fun because it would bring in Lobster Johnson and Nazis, or Nazi stand-ins, and it was basically the first one dealt with Japanese legends and all that, and kind of was a tribute to Hellboy short stories. The second one was more about Hellboy's heritage in Eastern Europe with vampires and werewolves and that sort of thing. And the third one was going to be the mad scientist side of Hellboy, and that would have been fantastic to work on. So that was easily my favorite project, second to Darkwing. Now, Atlantis, had we been able to do that, at least in the early scripts, was so cool, so great. And it was tragic we didn't get to go with it. And there was there were artists who were getting scripts and they just felt like, oh my God, this is going to be so cool. It's so cool, because we were making it, if not PG, we were basically following the feeling of the feature. But they didn't have syndication at the time, so they tried. It was supposed to go on to ABC Saturday morning, and this is right after they had already switched to one Saturday morning, and it just stood out as being, which of these things is not like the other? And then when the movie came out and didn't immediately make a huge hit on the first weekend, it was the excuse of the ABC executives saying, nope, we're not doing it. So that was too bad. That would have been I had a great team on that. It would have been fantastic to do that as we originally started.
All right, awesome. So that brings us to her second question. If you can, or third, if you can give any piece of advice for young dreamer artists, what would it be? Asking for a friend. She means herself.
I always say this, only a little bit facetiously, is brush every day and floss more, because that's really solid advice. Keep your teeth in good shape. You will appreciate that later on in life.
Yes.
I am so detached from the animation industry as it is now, there's no advice I can give. All I know is that there's a lot of super talented people that at the moment are having trouble finding jobs because the industry expanded hugely and then suddenly contracted when after doing all these streaming shows, and they say, oh, we're not sure we want to do more streaming shows, and things were canceled when they were almost finished, both in live action and animation. But the main thing is, if you want to be an artist, you got to keep drawing. You just have to do that. When it comes to a love of comics or something like that, because I mean, you're seeing it happen right now on screen. It's like there are tools now that allow you to, certainly publish online, if not actually physical things, the various, and there's different, the problem is getting enough eyeballs on it, of course. I kind of thought when I retired that I'd be playing around with comics, and I started to, and my wife walked in after a month of this and said, you can't spend 18 hours a day in this little room, doing this. And I realized, I didn't give up a profitable career in animation for a non-paying career in comics. And it was one of those things where I was always geared for series, like ongoing stories and all that. And it's like, well, that sounds like a real job. I don't want a real job. It's fun to do, So it did change things a lot, What I would love to do right now, and this is getting away from her question because it's not advice for them, but for me, my dream job right now would be if Dynamite wants to do, and I think they should do, like six-issue limited series of the various Justice Ducks. I would love to be part of a conference, either online or in the same room, and just be able to like bat around ideas and plus things, suggest things, never needing to be the end result, but just I think Amanda Dibert did such a great job on Morgana Macabre, who is our supernatural character and our Catwoman in some ways to Darkwing, that I would love to see her get a chance to do a 6-issue supernatural story. And maybe Darkwing's not in it at all, but just treat it as, here's a character in the tradition of Dr. Fate, Zatanna, Doctor Strange, all the magic users in comics, but have fun with it like we do with Darkwing Silver Age, play with what's been done on that side of things, throughout the years. We have an Aquaman character, give me an undersea adventure that does, do 6 issues of that. In other words, I'd love to be in a room throwing around ideas, not having to do any of the work.
I dig it.
That's my goal.
That's the goal. I dig it. I like that. All righty. Sorry. So we've got all these projects that you have worked on, that you've done, that you jumped around with. As an artist, as a creative out here in the field, I mean, I know you're retired now, but when you're jumping around from these projects, what is it that you can tell other people who are trying to be in this world? What got you the next gig? What do you think helped pass you from one project to the next?
Well, I gotta say, I was at Disney for 30 years. And then I had another 10 years in the industry outside of Disney. I was not built for freelancing. When I left Disney, it's like Thursday came around, my hand went out and nobody put a check in it. It was like, wait, I'm not used to that. And the thing about that is that as you're coming to an end of a gig, depending on your relationship with any studio you're working at, it's like you have to start worrying about the next gig. So as a guy who created shows, that's real touchy because there's fewer as you go up. It's like a pyramid, and the people at the top are the showrunners, and there's fewer of those than there are storyboard artists. It takes a lot of storyboard artists to do a show, but they're all run by one guy at the top. Well, if you're trying to keep continuing to create shows, that was really hard. It was super hard for me. I didn't really succeed much, other than, I would pitch things around, but it was mostly people I knew from Disney, who had left Disney, who knew what I could do, and brought me onto the project, like that Peter Rabbit, the Burr Rabbit project.
All right, thank you. So, and I asked that because I think it is because we do have other people who watch the show who are in the arts, comics, animation, cosplay, and things like that. And they're all trying to find a way to make it work for them so they can make a living on it. But I always think it's good to ask those type of questions of people who have basically done the survival of the fittest in this field, so they get realistic expectations on it, so they can properly plan on how to dive into it. So I appreciate you giving it.
I mean, the big difference now is, don't let, chasing the final project. I mean, basically, you can create gag cartoons, you could do drawings, you can start cobbling together stories, you can still, if you want to get in comic books, make a comic book. And it doesn't matter. In the old days, I mean, it's right now, like I said, I did the cover of an ash can. What an ash can used to be is you would go to a convention and the artist and writer had stapled together, like taken a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, fold it in half, and basically put a bunch of those together and staple it to do this very crude, paper comic. And that was the ash can to give out, see what we can do, or see what we want to do. Now you can do that and make it look beautiful doing an online thing. But I mean, you can't get a job by not showing what you can do. So if you wanted to get into comics, make some comics, and don't skip the hard parts. If you do a bunch of pinups, and this is old information that I assume everybody knows, if you're trying to get a job in comics, don't just draw a bunch of covers and pinups, because that doesn't say anything about your storytelling. It's like, how do you tell a story? How, can you do a two pages of a suspenseful situation where somebody's creeping into a place and they don't realize there's unseen danger there, but the reader knows it? Or, how are you going to play that out? Or, what's obviously you can do an action sequence would be another thing you can show, but it's really the storytelling. What's some emotion? Give me a page where you feel something for the characters, or you can tell it's a very emotional moment. A guy breaking up with a girl, get that, and make it not just a bunch of words, but the body language should be able to tell that thing. Who literally walks away from who? Is the last panel like a wide down shot of a person just standing there slumped, and somebody 10 feet away from them, just with their backs to them, walking away? How are you going to do that? Do you show them? Jim Steranko used to experiment all sorts of things when he was doing Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., of just breaking up a page into not just the full scene, but some little detail. Mike Mignola does that on Hellboy pages. You'll see like a little bird, a little drawing of a little bird with a word balloon that's empty, where before you saw it with a word balloon with a note in it. Now it's empty. It's like it's gone silent. It's an indicator of what's going on. You're watching, he'll do a page and you realize here's a picture of a wolf, and it's like they're seemingly watching the action. And the way he does a page that's brilliant is, it's not just that there's these wolf characters like looking at it. When you stand back and look at the page after it's been colored, you realize, oh, here's the action, and the wolves are basically these spirits or whatever laughing at this poor guy who made the wrong decisions and whatever. It's really, I mean, again, you can see I've got a bunch of Darkwing and Chippendale stuff behind me, but let me pivot to my Hellboy wall.
Oh, wow.
And you're talking some Mike Mignola original art there. And, these are actually statues from my Hellboy, animated series. So
awesome.
just filled a can of stuff. So.
Tessa, I'm trying so hard to compose myself because that's exactly what I thought when he said that. That's something that I speak on with people when they're showing portfolios and stuff at comic book conventions.
Yeah.
But that's my favorite. Those are my favorite things to draw in comic books are the conversation scenes that have emotion in them. So it's just so funny that you said that.
Well, it's
But
like that's again that storytelling is um, not just you can have an action sequence like a
mhm,
car chase, and you can be technically brilliant with it, and it still can just be, well, that's very nice drawing. But if you somehow put panels in that makes you care about somebody in those cars or what's going on in the car as they're chasing, that you care about them, then suddenly this car chase has a lot more emotional impact because you're caring about the characters. That's what you want. If you can turn out pages like that, you can show what you can do. I mean, there's the old things like don't try to hide how you can't draw hands. Hands are important and expressive. There's all that technical stuff, but the storytelling is like, how do you do your pacing? How do you make something, do you use little panels, a bunch of quick cuts to make it seem like it's going faster, or is that slowing down the time? All of that stuff is what you want to. If the only way you're going to get good at that is not just reading a lot of comics, is draw them yourselves. Try to give yourself the same challenge. Um, if you're inspired by something you've read, say, okay, I want to do the same thing but in reverse. I'm going to put it aside, and I'm going to reverse the dynamics of the characters or whatever, and then give yourself that assignment to do that. That's what's going to, impress an editor who's looking for artists, you know.
I want to say very much so. I just feel like you're one of my teachers from college. With everything that you have said is like everything that they have bred in me as an illustrator, and I thank you for confirming their knowledge and passing that on.
Yeah.
Uh, Very much so. We're coming around the end here, but I did want to attempt to sketch out a Darkwing Duck and get your feedback from you on what you think and how I can make this Darkwing Duck better.
I would say you did the half-lidded eyes, but you've got to be clear on the attitude. Like when one of the lines that we used in our pitch that wasn't really part of the show, although the attitude was that Darkwing Duck, looking good while doing good, where he really thinks like, I am so cool. So that expression, actually, if your head was a little more, the head you drew was more 3/4 and kind of he's looking at you that way, side eye would make him feeling like that
Okay.
cool, and then it's a matter of as far as holding the cape, it's like you just have to think of yourself, okay, if that's my attitude where I'm looking cool, where am I going to tilt the shoulders to, how am I going to flourish that cape?
Mm,
Am I going to be out like that, or am I going to that's pretty cool, look. Like,
okay.
imagine that guy looking in a mirror and saying, yeah, it's like, yeah, I'm sweet.
That's amazing because
Yeah.
like I get it. Like hearing you break that down and now looking at what I drew, I completely get it. And now I see the pose in my damn head now. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. That is
And you know what? That reminded me of something they did in Jeff Parker in the Negaduck series. That's part of the Kickstarter collection. He put more Darkwing into Negaduck. I mean, Negaduck's supposed to be evil Darkwing, but we really played him one note. He was just this evil guy, gruff, and given the choice, he'll always choose the chainsaw. That's just how he rolls. And Jeff found a way to take some of Darkwing's personality and put it into Negaduck more, and it actually makes him a more three-dimensional character. He has this big ego too, and he's got his sense of right and wrong being the top. He's doing some great stuff in the series that's out now. I just got a new issue on my Kindle.
uh-huh.
Yeah, so all that's again reason to go for the Kickstarter, and I think their next big goal is 300,000. And
Yeah.
we got like, I don't know, 5 days to do that. So,
Well, chat, stream, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, Kick, Twitter. I think that's all of them. You heard them. They're trying to get 300,000 on this. That right there is the QR code, and it is populating in the chat, so you can click on it, or you can scan that with your phone, take you right to Kickstarter, and go ahead and make a pledge. And you know what? Even if you can't pledge any money to the Kickstarter, share it out there. There are millions of Darkwing Duck fans out there that would appreciate this. So just go out there, share it out there to somebody. Sharing is completely free, and it's just as helpful as pledging. The more people that know about it, the better. And it's going to help bring this thing to life. But also, hey, we got the legend here, man. Go check him out. Go give him a follow on social media. All right. I am very lucky. I just got the 5-minute teaching real quick on my sketch. And I feel like I learned a lot just from that. So go ahead and follow Ted Stones on his social media. This will take you right to it. Check out what he's doing and to see what conventions he'll be at and appearing at.
Actually, I'm not appearing at any right now. So here's the thing. If there's an convention near you that's like more than a one-day event and you want me there, let the convention know. Because basically that's what I was doing before. And my last big convention I did before the pandemic was in Moscow.
Oh, wow.
And it turned out in Russia, when the Iron Curtain went down, the first cartoons they got were pretty much the Disney Afternoon and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I had lines for people waiting in line for 4 hours just to have their picture taken with me or have me sign something for them. And I was just blown away. I was treated like a rock star. But it was like every kid of that generation, was a fan of the show. They grew up with the show. And what they told me in the middle that never occurred to me, because they didn't have comic books before. They didn't have animated series like we had before. Mm-hmm. They said, Dad, we didn't know that Darkwing Duck was a parody. Like, they didn't have any of the, we'd base things on Twilight Zone shows and certainly on old comic adventures and villains. They just thought we were just creating that whole cloth. They just took it on face value. They thought it was a very funny guy, but they didn't know it was based on, superheroes. They didn't know what superheroes were at the time. Now they do. Now they have their own comic companies and stuff. But that was just amazing for me to find out. So hit up your local comic convention. See if they'll get me out there.
I actually have a comic convention that we're working with, and they're looking for people. So do they reach out to you through email, or do you have an agent that you prefer that they
No agent. It's just, they can just give me an email. And like I say, it's like, if they can get me there. So if it doesn't cost me money, I'm happy to show up to as many panels as they want. And, I usually will have some original art there, and now I'm at the age where we're trying to get rid of stuff. So I said, I have these old Hellboy statues I'll get rid of, Anyway, so yeah, if you have an organizer who wants to do something like that, I'm up for it.
I'm absolutely sure they would love to. So I'll let them know, and it is okay for me to give them your email.
Sure.
All right, cool beans. Well, look, hey, sir, you have made my day. I am a 42-year-old child at heart, and I tell you, when I watched your cartoons, after school, Saturday mornings. It is so awesome to be able to be a kid who watched it to now do an interview with you and get to hear about your experiences and how you got there, and even get some tips from you on it. So thank you so much for being welcome on the show. Really, really appreciate it. And again, you all, the links are in the chat. Give them a follow. Follow them on the social media. Please go check out the Kickstarter. If you cannot pledge to Kickstarter, that's perfectly fine. Just go ahead and give it a share. And shameless plug for me, check out my comics, fsknow.com, or a Patreon service. We got shirts and everything on there, man. Go check us out. We're doing the thing too. All right. Thank you. And we will catch you guys at the next one. This has been an incredibly epic night tonight on Chat and Draw. Shout out to Tessa, our manager here, making things happen for our network and making us grow in things. And we will see you next time. Everybody, stay epic.
Stay dangerous.
I think that I should ask Mr. Watson. think that I should ask Mr. Watson. I think that I should ask Mr. Watson.